The rich aroma of garlic and basil wrapped around me like my Nonna's embrace as I stood in the kitchen of Wright's, the restaurant that had been my family's heart and soul for 3 generations. My fingers traced the worn edges of her handwritten recipe book, the pages yellowed but still holding the secrets to the dishes that had made us famous in downtown Seattle. I'm Bianca, and until yesterday, I thought I knew exactly who I was and where I belonged. Your grandmother would be proud of how you've kept this place running, Shane, our head chef, said as he chopped herbs with practiced precision. 2 years since she passed, and the restaurant's doing better than ever. I smiled, though my stomach churned with the weight of the conversation I'd had with my husband Daryl the night before. Thanks, Shane. I just wish. The kitchen door burst open. My sister Alexandra rushed in, her face flushed. Bianca, you need to see this, now. I followed her to the office, where she thrust a paper into my hands. My eyes scanned the document, but the words didn't make sense at first. Property transfer? Sale agreement? Closing date? This can't be right, I whispered, my hands shaking. I only signed papers to transfer ownership within our family corporation yesterday. Daryl said it was for tax purposes. Well, your darling husband lied, Alexandra spat. He's sold rights to some developer. They're planning to tear it down for a parking structure. The room spun. I grabbed the desk to steady myself, my grandmother's voice echoing in my memory. Tesoro, trust is earned in drops, but lost in buckets. I pulled out my phone, dialing Daryl's number, straight to voicemail. Again and again. He's been in meetings all morning, Timothy, his business partner, told me when I called his office. Bianca, I thought you knew about the sale. He said you agreed it was necessary to save the tech startup. I hung up, bile rising in my throat. The startup. Of course, his precious company that had been hemorrhaging money for months. I'd supported him, believed in him, even when he came home at midnight smelling of whiskey and failure. I'll kill him, Alexandra declared, pacing the office. I'll actually kill him. Get in line, I muttered, pulling up my banking app. The restaurant's accounts were already locked. In less than 24 hours, my husband had managed to strip away everything my family had built. Shane appeared in the doorway, concern etched on his face. Boss, there are some men here. They say they're from the new ownership group. I straightened my spine, channeling every ounce of my grandmother's strength. Tell them I'll be right out. What are you going to do? Alexandra asked. I'm going to face them, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. Then I'm going to find my husband and remind him exactly who he married. The men in suits were waiting in the dining room, looking out of place among the checkered tablecloths and family photos. The leader stepped forward, extending his hand. Mrs. Evans, I'm Robert from Cascade Development. We're here to begin the preliminary assessment. I ignored his hand. This is my family's restaurant. There's been a mistake. He pulled out a folder. No mistake, ma'am. The sale was finalized this morning. Your husband's signature is right here, along with yours. My signature. On papers I'd trusted my husband to explain truthfully. Papers I'd signed while he kissed my neck and whispered about our future. Get out, I said quietly. Mrs. Evans, get out. My voice carried across the restaurant, causing several lunch customers to look up from their plates. My lawyer will be contacting you. Until then, this property is still in dispute. After they left, I sank into a chair, my grandmother's photo watching me from the wall. Her eyes seemed to hold both sympathy and disappointment. What do we do now? Alexandra asked, sitting beside me. My phone buzzed with a text from Daryl. It was the only way to save the company. You'll understand soon. I love you. I deleted the message without responding. Now we fight back. Nonna didn't build this place by giving up when things got hard. But how? He's got all the legal documents. A customer at the bar caught my attention. A elegant woman in her 40s, watching me with interest over her glass of wine. She'd been coming in regularly for weeks, always sitting in the same spot, always ordering the same Barolo. First, I said, standing up, I'm going to have a conversation with Elena Costa. Something tells me she might be interested in hearing about my husband's business practices. Alexandra's eyes widened. Elena Costa, the venture capitalist? I nodded, straightening my apron. Daryl thinks he can take everything from me? Fine. But he's about to learn what happens when you underestimate a right woman. The woman at the bar raised her glass slightly, a knowing smile playing at her lips. Sometimes revenge, like the best recipes, just needs the right ingredients. I found Daryl in his downtown office, surrounded by empty coffee cups and illuminated by multiple monitors displaying plummeting stock charts. He didn't look up when I entered, just kept typing frantically. Were you ever going to tell me? I asked, my voice eerily calm. Or were you planning to wait until the bulldozers showed up? He finally looked at me, dark circles under his eyes. Bianca, please, you have to understand. Understand what? I slammed my hands on his desk. That you forged my signature? That you sold my family's legacy to save your failing company? I didn't forge anything. You signed those papers yourself. Under false pretenses, you told me it was a tax document. Daryl stood up, running his hands through his disheveled hair. The company was about to go under. We needed capital immediately. The restaurant was our only asset with enough value. Our? I laughed bitterly. That restaurant was never yours. My grandmother built it from nothing. She worked 18-hour days, saved every penny, created something real. While you're destroying people's lives chasing some tech fantasy. It's not a fantasy. He grabbed my shoulders. We're on the verge of a breakthrough. Once our new software launches, I shrugged him off. Don't touch me. You've lost that right. A knock interrupted us. Timothy stood in the doorway, looking uncomfortable. Sorry, but the investors are waiting in the conference room. Tell them 5 minutes, Daryl said, not taking his eyes off me. Actually, Timothy shifted awkwardly. Elena Costa is with them. She's not happy about the delays. Daryl's face paled. Shit. Bianca, we'll talk about this later. No, we won't. I pulled off my wedding ring and placed it on his desk. There's nothing left to talk about. Don't do this, he pleaded. Everything I did for us. For us? I stepped closer, lowering my voice. You know what today is, Daryl? It's the anniversary of Nonna's death. I was going to cook her signature dish tonight, invite the whole family. Instead, I spent the morning watching strange men measure my restaurant for demolition. His eyes widened in recognition, then guilt. He'd forgotten, of course. Daryl, Timothy called again, more urgently. They're getting impatient. I turned to leave, but Daryl caught my wrist. Wait, just let me explain everything tonight. Please. I yanked my arm free. You know what Nonna used to say? In business and in love, trust is everything. Guess you failed at both. Walking through the office, I passed the conference room. Through the glass walls, I saw Elena Costa sitting at the head of the table, radiating authority in her tailored suit. Our eyes met briefly, and I swear I saw a flicker of recognition. Alexandra was waiting in my car outside. How did it go? About as well as expected. I gripped the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white. He tried to justify it, said it was for us. Bastard. She pulled out her phone. I've been doing some digging. His company's in worse shape than we thought. They've missed their last 2 payrolls. Really? I started the car. That's interesting, considering he just sold my restaurant for $3 million. $3 million? Alexandra whistled. Where's all that money going? Before I could answer, my phone buzzed with a text from Shane. The development guys are back. They're taking inventory of the kitchen equipment. They're what? I slammed on the brakes, earning angry honks from behind. They can't do that yet. The sale isn't final for 30 days. Actually, Alexandra scrolled through the documents on her phone. According to this, they can start preliminary work immediately. Daryl gave them authorization. I pulled over, fighting back tears of rage. He's really thought of everything, hasn't he? Not everything. Alexandra showed me her screen. Look who just followed you on Instagram. Elena Costa herself. I stared at the notification. Why would she? Remember what Timothy said about her being unhappy with Daryl's company? Alexandra's eyes sparkled. Maybe she's looking for allies. My phone buzzed again, this time with a direct message from Elena. That was quite an exit you made. Perhaps we should discuss our mutual acquaintance over dinner? Alexandra read over my shoulder and grinned. Oh, this is getting good. I thought about Daryl's face when Timothy mentioned Elena's name, the fear in his eyes. You know what? Maybe it is. What are you thinking? I typed a response to Elena. I know a great Italian place. Well, I used to. Her reply came instantly. Tomorrow, 7 p.m., the Metropolitan Grill. We'll discuss how to properly handle men who underestimate women in business. I smiled for the first time that day. Alexandra, call Shane. Tell him to hold on to Nonna's recipe book. Something tells me we're going to need it soon. Now that, my sister said, sounds like a recipe for revenge. The Metropolitan Grill hummed with power dinners and deal-making conversations. Elena sat at a corner table, commanding attention without effort. She stood as I approached, greeting me with a firm handshake and appraising eyes. You're exactly as I imagined, she said, gesturing for me to sit. A woman who knows her worth. Funny, I replied, smoothing my dress. I don't feel very worthy right now. That's exactly what men like your husband count on. Elena signaled the waiter. Bottle of Barolo, please, the same one I enjoyed at Wright's. My throat tightened at the name. You were a regular. Every Thursday for the past 2 months. She leaned forward. I make it a point to know my investments thoroughly, including their vulnerabilities. Investments? Your husband's company. Elena's lips curved into a sharp smile. Though I'm starting to think I backed the wrong right. The waiter returned with the wine, and Elena waited until he'd poured and left before continuing. Do you know why I invested in your husband's startup? I shook my head. Because you convinced me to. She held up a hand as I started to protest. Not directly, but I watched you transform that restaurant, double the revenue in 2 years, modernize the operations while keeping the soul intact. I thought, if this woman believes in him enough to marry him, he must have something special. I was wrong about him, I said quietly. No, I was wrong about him. You were just loyal. Elena took a sip of wine. Tell me, what would you do if you had the resources to start over? The answer came without hesitation. I'd open a new restaurant. Not just any restaurant, but one that honors everything Nonna taught me while being completely my own. And if that restaurant happened to be directly across from your husband's office, I nearly choked on my wine. What? Elena pulled out her tablet, showing me a real estate listing. The old bank building, prime location, historical architecture, and coincidentally, for sale. It would make quite a statement, don't you think? That would be impossible. The startup costs alone are nothing to someone with the right backing. Elena set down her glass. Here's what your husband doesn't know. I'm pulling my investment from his company. His software is derivative, his leadership is weak, and now I know he's willing to commit fraud to save himself. My heart raced. The transfer documents were clearly signed under false pretenses. My lawyers are already building a case. She paused. But legal battles are tedious. I prefer more creative solutions. Why would you help me? Because I'm tired of men like Daryl thinking they can play games with people's lives. Because I believe in backing winners. She smiled. And because the food at Wright's was exceptional. Just then, my phone buzzed. A text from Shane. They're packing up Nonna's old pizza oven, the one she brought from Italy. Said it's going to salvage. My hands shook with anger. Elena noticed. They're dismantling your restaurant piece by piece, aren't they? I nodded, unable to speak. Let me tell you something about revenge, Bianca. The best kind isn't loud or destructive, it's successful. It's building something so magnificent that your enemies are forced to watch you thrive. And that's what you're offering? A chance to thrive? I'm offering partnership. My capital, your expertise. She pulled out a business card. Plus, I know a certain talented chef who's about to be out of a job. Shane would follow me anywhere, I said, thinking of his loyalty over the years. Then let's give him somewhere worth going. Elena raised her glass. To new beginnings? I hesitated, Nonna's voice in my head warning about deals made in anger. But then I remembered her other lessons about standing up for yourself, about not letting anyone dim your light. Wait, I said, I have conditions. First, the restaurant stays true to my family's values, no cutting corners on quality. Naturally. Second, I want to hire back as many of my old staff as possible. They're family. Done. And third, I took a deep breath. I want to name it Maria's. Elena's eyebrows rose. After your grandmother? She taught me everything I know about food, about business, about life. I felt tears threatening but held them back. Daryl may have taken rights, but he can't take her legacy. Maria's it is. Elena pulled out a folder I hadn't noticed before. I took the liberty of having my lawyers draw up preliminary partnership papers, take them home, review them carefully. Unlike some people, I believe in full transparency. As I reached for the folder, my wedding ring-free hand steady and sure, Elena added, "Oh, and Bianca, the space has excellent windows, perfect for your husband to watch his wife succeed while his company crumbles." I left the restaurant that night with a folder full of possibilities and a fire in my heart. Revenge, it turned out, could taste as sweet as Nonna's tiramisu. "The acoustics in here are incredible," Alexandra said, her voice echoing through the empty bank building. "Can't you just hear the dinner rush already?" I stood in the center of the vast space, imagining tables filled with happy diners, the warmth of conversation mixing with the scents from the kitchen. The morning light streamed through the towering windows, illuminating the intricate crown molding and marble columns. "Over here," Shane called from near the back wall. "This is where we'll put the wood-fired oven. The ventilation's perfect." Elena walked in, heels clicking on the hardwood floors. "The contractor can start tomorrow. We'll need to move quickly if we want to open in 3 months." 3 months? I spun around. That's impossible. Impossible is what people say when they lack motivation. Elena handed me a stack of permits. These were just approved. Amazing how quickly bureaucracy moves when you know the right people. Shane joined us, practically bouncing with excitement. "I've been calling the old crew. Everyone wants in. Even Marco's willing to leave his cushy hotel job to come back." "Really?" Marco had been Nonna's right hand for 15 years before Wright's was sold. But he always said corporate benefits were nothing compared to family. A familiar voice boomed from the entrance. Marco stood there, his chef's coat slung over his shoulder. "You think I'd miss this?" I ran to hug him, breathing in the familiar scent of garlic and herbs that seemed to permanently cling to him. "But how did you know?" "Word travels fast in restaurant circles." He grinned, "especially when Elena Costa is involved." Elena cleared her throat. "Speaking of involvement, there's something you should see." She pulled up an article on her tablet. "Your husband's company just missed another payroll. Alexandra peered over my shoulder at the screen. Look at the comments. Their employees are furious. Their lead developer quit this morning, Elena added. Apparently, he didn't appreciate having his salary paid in empty promises. I should have felt satisfaction, but instead, a wave of sadness hit me. All those people losing their jobs? Don't, Elena said sharply. Don't waste sympathy on Daryl's mess. Focus on the people you can help, your team, your family. Marco clapped his hands. Speaking of team, let me show you my ideas for the kitchen layout. We spent the next hour planning spaces, arguing over equipment placement, and dreaming up possibilities. Shane and Marco debated the merits of different ranges, while Alexandra sketched table arrangements on her iPad. We'll need to modernize some of Nonna's recipes, Shane said carefully, watching my reaction. Not change them, just adapt them for a higher volume kitchen. Nonna would understand, Marco assured me. She always said tradition should guide us, not chain us. A commotion at the door interrupted our planning. Timothy stood there, looking uncomfortable. Bianca, he said, stepping forward, can we talk? Elena moved to intervene, but I held up a hand. It's okay. 5 minutes, Timothy. We walked to a quiet corner while the others pretended not to listen. Daryl's a mess, Timothy said without preamble. He knows he screwed up. The company's imploding, and now with Elena pulling out. Did he send you? No, he doesn't know I'm here. Timothy ran a hand through his hair. Look, I feel partially responsible. I should have said something when he first proposed selling rights. Why didn't you? Because I believed in him, in the company. He laughed bitterly. Pretty stupid, huh? Not stupid, loyal. I touched his arm, like I was. The difference is, your loyalty was to something real. He glanced around the space. This is real too, isn't it? I nodded. It will be. Good. He handed me a USB drive. Here's everything. Financials, emails, the real numbers behind the company. Use it however you want. Timothy, he's my friend, but what he did to you was wrong. He started to leave, then turned back. Oh, and Bianca, the software he's betting everything on, it doesn't work. Never did. The demos were all smoke and mirrors. After he left, Elena appeared at my side. Well, that was unexpected. What do I do with this? I held up the drive. Nothing for now. She smiled wickedly. Sometimes the best revenge is letting your enemies destroy themselves while you build something beautiful. I walked back to the group where Shane and Marco were still arguing about kitchen equipment. Okay, I announced. Let's talk about the pizza oven. Already ordered, Elena said. The exact model from your grandmother's restaurant. It'll be here next week. I stared at her. How did you? I told you, I do my research. She checked her watch. Now, we have a meeting with the interior designer in 20 minutes. I'm thinking we showcase local artists, really emphasize community connections. As everyone gathered their things, I took one last look around the space. Through the windows, I could see Daryl's office building looming across the street. Soon, he'd have a perfect view of everything he'd lost. Ready? Alexandra asked, linking her arm through mine. Ready, I replied, turning my back on the view. It was time to create something new. Opening night at Maria's felt like a dream. The renovated bank building glowed with warmth, its windows casting golden light onto the street. A line stretched around the block, and I recognized faces from Wrights mixed with curious newcomers. They're here for you, Alexandra whispered, adjusting my chef's coat. Not just the food, they're here because they believe in you. The dining room buzzed with energy. Every table was filled, and the bar area overflowed with people waiting to be seated. Marco and Shane orchestrated the kitchen like conductors, calling orders and directing traffic with practiced ease. Table 7 wants to meet the owner, our hostess said. approaching with a nervous smile. It's some food critics from the Seattle Times. I took a deep breath, straightened my shoulders, and walked to their table. The critics were mid-bite when I arrived, their expressions rapturous. "This carbonara," the lead critic said, "it's exactly like what I had at Wright's, but somehow better." "My grandmother's recipe," I explained, "with a few modern touches. And the space," he gestured around, "the way you've honored the building's history while creating something entirely new. Brilliant." A commotion near the entrance drew my attention. Daryl stood in the doorway, looking disheveled and angry. Elena materialized beside me instantly. "I'll handle this," she said, but I shook my head. "No, it's time I did." I approached my soon-to-be ex-husband, noting his untucked shirt and wild eyes. "You can't be here, Daryl." "Can't be here?" He laughed too loudly. "My wife opens a restaurant across from my office, and I can't be here?" "Ex-wife," I corrected quietly. "The papers were served last week." "This is what you do?" He gestured around frantically. "Take my investor, steal my employees." "Your employees?" I cut him off. "You mean the ones you haven't paid in 6 weeks? The ones who had to take second jobs to make rent?" Several nearby diners were watching now, phones discreetly recording. "You're trying to destroy me," he accused. "No, Daryl, you did that yourself." I kept my voice steady. "Now, please leave before I call security." "You think you're so clever?" He stepped closer, breath sour with alcohol. "You and Elena plotting behind my back? I built a tech company from nothing." "You built lies," I replied. "I built this." I gestured to the packed restaurant. Real food, real people, real success. Not smoke and mirrors and empty promises. "How dare you?" Marco and Shane appeared on either side of me, arms crossed. Timothy emerged from the crowd, placing a hand on Daryl's shoulder. "Come on, man," Timothy said gently. "Don't do this." "You too?" Daryl shrugged him off. "You're all against me?" "No one's against you," I said. "We're just not under your spell anymore." Elena stepped forward, phone in hand. "Leave now, or I release the contents of that USB drive to every tech blog in Seattle." Daryl's face went pale. He looked around at the crowd of witnesses, at the former employees now working in my restaurant, at the success he couldn't touch. Without another word, he turned and stumbled out. Timothy lingered. "I'm sorry about that. I'll make sure he gets home safely." "Thank you," I said, meaning it. As the excitement died down, Elena raised an eyebrow. "Well handled." "I learned from the best." I smiled. "Both you and Nonna." The rest of the night flew by in a blur of happy customers and empty plates. Near closing, Shane brought out a special dish, Nonna's signature tiramisu, made exactly as she taught me. "To Maria's," Elena raised her glass, surrounded by our staff, "and to the woman who inspired it all." "To Nonna," everyone echoed. I looked around at my new family, the staff who'd followed me, the sister who'd supported me, the mentor who'd believed in me. Through the windows, I could see Daryl's dark office building, a reminder of what I'd lost and what I'd gained. Alexandra hugged me from behind. "Nonna would be so proud." "You think so?" "Are you kidding?" Marco called from the kitchen. "She's probably up there bragging to all the other angels about her granddaughter right now." As the staff cleaned up, sharing jokes and stories, I slipped into the kitchen. The pizza oven, the same one from Wright's, glowed with dying embers. I placed my hand on its warm surface, remembering countless nights watching Nonna work her magic here. "You were right," I whispered to her memory. "Success is the best revenge." "Chef," Shane called. "The staff wants to know if we can pop some champagne to celebrate." I looked at our sales numbers for the night, at the stack of positive comment cards, at the happy faces of my team. Bring out the good stuff, I called back. Tonight, we celebrate everything. Through the kitchen window, I watched my family, old and new, gathering in the dining room, and I finally felt complete. Nonna had built rights from nothing. Now I'd built Maria's from everything she taught me. And that was worth more than any revenge. Another five-star review, Alexandra announced, sliding her tablet across my desk. They're calling Maria's the best Italian restaurant in Seattle. I should have been ecstatic, but Elena's earlier words still echoed in my head. She wanted to franchise, to expand, to turn Maria's into a chain. Think bigger, she'd said. Why stop at one success when you could have an empire? A knock interrupted my thoughts. Shane poked his head in. We've got a situation. I followed him to the dining room where Marco stood arguing with a health inspector. This is harassment, Marco insisted. We just passed inspection last week. The inspector, a thin man with a clipboard, smiled thinly. We received an anonymous complaint. Let me guess, I said, stepping forward. About our ventilation system? He consulted his clipboard. Among other things. The same ventilation system that passed 3 inspections this month? I pulled out my phone. Should I call the department head? I'm sure she'd love to hear about these repeated anonymous complaints. The inspector's smile faltered. That won't be necessary. After he left, Marco slammed his hand on the counter. Daryl, it has to be. Of course it's Daryl, Shane agreed. He's been sending his cronies in every night, trying to find something wrong. I rubbed my temples. How's his company doing? Not good, Alexandra said, reading from her phone. Stock's down 80% since the scandal broke. Most of the staff jumped ship to their competitors. Chef, one of our servers rushed in. You need to see this. She led us to table 12 where Elena sat across from a familiar face, Timothy. Their conversation looked intense. I should go over there, I said, but Shane grabbed my arm. Wait, look. Timothy handed Elena a thick folder. She opened it, nodded, then slid an envelope across the table. They shook hands, and Timothy walked toward us. Bianca, he said, looking nervous, can we talk? In my office, Timothy paced while I waited. Daryl's lost it, he finally said. He's talking about lawsuits, about destroying Maria's reputation. He's obsessed. The health inspections? Just the beginning. He's hired people to post fake reviews, to call the liquor board, even to try bribing your staff for dirt. I leaned back. Why are you telling me this? Because I'm done. He sat heavily. I just sold my shares to Elena. I'm out. Timothy? He was my best friend, he continued, but I don't recognize him anymore. The lies, the manipulation, it's not just business anymore. It's personal. A knock interrupted us. Elena entered, holding the folder Timothy had given her. You should see this, she said, spreading documents across my desk. Proof of every illegal thing Daryl's done in the past year, including the fraudulent transfer of rights. My hands shook as I read. This is enough to bury him? Elena's smile was sharp. Yes. The question is, do you want to? I looked at Timothy. Why now? Because of this. He pulled out his phone, showing me a text from Daryl. Time to destroy the bitch who ruined everything. He sent that this morning, Timothy said. After drinking all night, he's planning something big. As if on cue, Alexandra burst in. Turn on the news, now. I grabbed the remote, flipping to the local station. Daryl stood at a podium, looking surprisingly put together. And it saddens me to announce that my wife's new restaurant, Maria's, has been built on stolen proprietary information and fraudulent finances. He's lying, Marco shouted from the doorway. We'll be filing charges, Daryl continued. Elena calmly pulled out her phone. Time to end this. Wait, I said, watching my husband, this stranger, try to destroy everything I'd built. I have a better idea. I turned to Timothy. Those documents prove the rights transfer was fraudulent, right? He nodded. Elena, how quickly can your lawyers move? She smiled, understanding. Very quickly. Good. I picked up my phone. Because I'm not just going to defend Maria's, I'm going to take back rights. Alexandra gasped. Can you do that? With these documents? Elena examined the papers. Absolutely. The sale would be void. Everything would revert to Bianca. Do it, I said, watching Daryl continue his speech. But first, call every food critic, blogger, and journalist who's reviewed Maria's. Tell them to be here tonight. What are you planning? Shane asked. I thought of Nonna, of her belief in facing challenges head on. I'm going to tell my story, all of it. Let Seattle decide who to believe, the failed tech CEO or the woman who's feeding them their grandmother's recipes. Elena was already dialing. I love it. Transparency as revenge. Not revenge, I corrected. Justice. For rights. For Nonna. For everyone he's hurt. As my team sprang into action, I watched Daryl on screen, seeing him clearly for the first time. He wasn't the man I'd loved. He was just another bully who thought he could take what wasn't his. Well, not anymore. Tonight, I'd remind Seattle what real authenticity tastes like. And tomorrow? Tomorrow, I'd take back everything he stole. The press conference was set for 7 p.m. prime dinner hour. Every table at Maria's was filled with journalists, food critics, and loyal customers. Camera crews set up their equipment while Shane and Marco worked magic in the kitchen. Ready? Alexandra squeezed my hand. Before I could answer, the front door burst open. Daryl stormed in, followed by two men in suits. You can't do this, he shouted. I have an injunction. No, you don't. Elena stepped forward, waving a document. Judge denied it 20 minutes ago. Would you like to see the ruling? The room fell silent, dozens of cameras turning to capture the scene. You're making a mistake, Daryl said, his voice dropping. Bianca, please, we can talk about this privately. Like how we talked about selling rights? I moved to the podium we'd set up. No more private conversations, Daryl. No more secrets. He grabbed my arm. Don't do this. Marco and Shane started forward, but Elena held up a hand. This was my battle. I pulled free of Daryl's grip. Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Bianca, and I have a story to tell you about two restaurants and one very important lesson my grandmother taught me. The cameras rolled as I recounted everything. Growing up in Wright's kitchen, Nonna's legacy, the fraudulent transfer, and the birth of Maria's. With each word, Daryl seemed to shrink. But this isn't just my story, I continued. It's about every small business owner who's been deceived, every family legacy threatened by corporate greed, every person who's ever been told their dreams are worth less than someone else's ambitions. Elena stepped forward, handling the technical details, the legal documents, the proof of fraud, the timeline of deception. Timothy provided supporting evidence, his testimony damning and precise. You're ruining everything, Daryl interrupted, his voice cracking. The company is already ruined, Timothy said quietly. It was never real, Daryl. The software doesn't work. It never did. That's a lie, Daryl lunged at Timothy. Security intercepted him as cameras flashed. The suited men who'd arrived with him quietly slipped away. Mr. Evans, a reporter called out, how do you respond to allegations that you defrauded investors? Another joined in. Is it true your company falsified demo results? Daryl's face contorted. This is all her fault. She's trying to destroy me because she's jealous of my success. Success? I laughed, genuinely amused. Let's talk about success. I gestured to the packed restaurant. Every person here has eaten both at Wright's and Maria's. They know authentic when they taste it. They understand the difference between real value and empty promises. You think you're so special, Daryl sneered. With your family recipes and your loyal customers, I built something innovative. No, Elena stepped in. You built a house of cards. Bianca built a home. As if on cue, Marco emerged from the kitchen carrying Nonna's signature dishes, the recipes that had fed generations. The familiar aroma filled the room, and I watched Daryl's face as he recognized the scents from our early dating days. You used to love these dishes, I said softly. You used to understand what they meant. Something broke in his expression. I just wanted to be successful, he whispered. Like you, like your grandmother. But you didn't want to work for it, I replied. You wanted shortcuts. Elena cleared her throat. The papers are ready. Full restoration of rights ownership to Bianca in exchange for dropping all potential criminal charges. Daryl stared at the documents, then at the room full of witnesses. His shoulders slumped. It's over, isn't it? It's been over, I said. You just couldn't see it. He signed without reading, then walked out without another word. The reporters erupted with questions, but Elena handled them smoothly while I slipped into the kitchen. Alexandra found me there, staring at Nonna's old pizza oven, the one we'd managed to save. You did it, she said, hugging me tight. You got rights back. We did it, I corrected, looking at my team, my family, all of us. Shane appeared with a bottle of champagne. So, Chef, what's next? Running 2 restaurants is gonna be 3, Elena interrupted, entering the kitchen. The building next to Wright's just came on the market. Perfect for a cooking school, don't you think? Teaching the next generation Nonna's lessons about food, family, and integrity. I looked around at these people who'd stood by me, who'd believed in something real. Nonna always said a good meal brings people together, but a great restaurant builds community. To community, Marco raised a glass. To family, Alexandra added. To justice, Elena smiled. To Nonna, I finished, feeling her presence in every corner of the kitchen. Outside, I could hear the journalists sharing their meals, exclaiming over the food, understanding finally that success isn't about winning or revenge. It's about creating something authentic and sharing it with the world. Rights would reopen, Maria's would thrive, and somewhere I knew Nonna was smiling. The aroma of fresh herbs and baking bread filled both kitchens as I walked the connecting pathway between Wright's and Maria's. Each restaurant hummed with its own unique energy, Wright's comfortable and traditional, Maria's modern and vibrant. Together, they told my family's story. Chef, Shane called from Wright's kitchen. The students are here for their final exam. In the teaching kitchen between the restaurants, 12 aspiring chefs stood at their stations, nervous energy radiating from their pressed whites. Alexandra moved between them, checking their setup. Today, I announced, you'll create 2 dishes, one from Wright's traditional menu and one modern interpretation for Maria's. Show us what you've learned about respecting tradition while embracing innovation. Elena slipped in quietly, taking her usual seat at the judges' table. Marco joined her, along with 3 other respected Seattle chefs. Begin, Alexandra called, and the kitchen erupted into controlled chaos. As the students worked, Timothy appeared at my side. Thought you'd want to know. Daryl took a job in Portland, entry-level programming position. How's he doing? Better, actually. Says he's learning to code properly this time. No shortcuts. A crash from Station 3 interrupted us. One of our students, Sarah, stood frozen as her saucepan dripped onto the floor. Deep breath, I said, approaching her station. What would Nonna do? Sarah closed her eyes, centering herself. Start fresh, but there's only 20 minutes left. Then we better work fast. I grabbed a clean pan. Show me what you remember about building flavors. As we worked, I caught Elena smiling. She'd been right about the cooking school. Teaching others helped heal something in me I hadn't realized was broken. The final presentations proved impressive. Sarah's recovered sauce earned particular praise, her modern twist on Nonna's recipe showing real understanding of both tradition and innovation. Before we announce the results, I said, I want to share something my grandmother told me when I was learning to cook. She said, in the kitchen, like in life, we must learn to balance holding on and letting go. The students nodded, understanding flowing deeper than just cooking. Speaking of balance, Elena stood up. I have an announcement. The investment group has approved expansion plans. 3 more Maria's locations, each paired with a cooking school. The room erupted in excited chatter, but Elena held up her hand. Each location will be run by someone who understands both the tradition of rites and the innovation of Maria's, someone who's completed this program. Sarah's eyes widened as understanding spread through the room. This wasn't just a cooking class. It was an opportunity to become part of something bigger. Later that evening, both restaurants were packed. I moved between them, watching my two families work in harmony. At Wright's, Marco taught a young server about the history behind each dish. At Maria's, Shane experimented with new techniques while keeping Nonna's principles intact. Alexandra found me in the connecting pathway. Look what I found in the old Wright's office. She handed me a worn envelope. Inside was a letter from Nonna, dated just before she passed. My dearest Bianca, by the time you read this, Wright's will be yours. But remember, a restaurant is more than walls and recipes. It's a place where life happens, where lessons are learned, love is shared, and sometimes hearts are broken. But from every breaking comes new growth. Don't be afraid to grow, my darling. Don't be afraid to change. Just keep the important things, love, family, authenticity, at the heart of everything you do. With all my love, Nonna. She knew, I whispered. She knew I'd need to hear this someday. She always knew, Alexandra smiled. Come on, the dinner rush is starting. In the Wright's dining room, I passed the table where Daryl and I had our first date. At Maria's, I saw the spot where Elena first proposed her plan for revenge that became something more like redemption. The cooking school students were helping in both kitchens tonight, learning to navigate between tradition and innovation. Sarah caught my eye and grinned, her confidence growing with every dish. Elena appeared with 2 glasses of Barolo. To balance? To growth, I countered, thinking of Nonna's letter. Through the windows, I could see the lights of Seattle spreading out before us. Somewhere out there, Daryl was starting over, learning his own lessons about authenticity and hard work. I hoped he'd find his way. But here, in this space between 2 restaurants, between past and future, I'd found something better than revenge. I'd found purpose. Chef, called voices from both kitchens. We need you. I handed my glass to Alexandra. Duty calls. Always does, she laughed. I headed toward the voices, ready to teach, to learn, to grow. Nonna was right. From every breaking comes new growth. And sometimes, the best revenge isn't revenge at all. It's building something so beautiful that it transforms not just your life, but the lives of everyone it touches. That's what Nonna did with Rights. That's what I was doing with Maria's. And that's what we'd keep doing. One dish, one student, one lesson at a time.